Hello, my name is Michelle Garcia, and we're happy to be rejoining our Winnemem Wintu and Run4Salmon family from up here in Kalapuyan lands in the Willamette River Valley in Eugene, Oregon. Today we're going to be sharing some activities that are featured in Mini Lesson 1 for the Run4Salmon, and these activities focus on learning about a watershed. What is a watershed? How does it work? And more importantly, where does your water come from? So when you turn on that faucet, do you know where your water comes from? And if you don't, this is your opportunity to find out. In Lesson 1, you learn about who the Winnemem Wintu are and where their homeland is, and the relationship with that homeland. The Winnemem's homeland is along the McCloud River, and the McCloud River waters come from Buliyum Puyuuk, or Mount Shasta. And so the rain and snow melt and the natural springs that come up from that mountain flow down through creeks and streams down into that river. But the McCloud River also feeds down into a much larger tributary, the main tributary of this watershed, the Sacramento River. And the Sacramento River flows down into the Bay-Delta and into the Pacific Ocean. And so if you live along or close to Buliyum Puyuuk, along the Sacramento River Valley, or in the San Francisco Bay area, you are connected to Buliyum Puyuuk, to the Winnemem, to the salmon through these waters. And if you live in the Central Valley or even in Southern California, you might also be connected through these waters, and you'll learn about that in Lesson 3. And so in describing that watershed, you can also see a watershed in action. And in Lesson 1, we give you two different activities, two different watershed models that you can try. The first one is really simple, and you probably have most of the materials already in your home. All you'll need is a piece of paper. And if you have a cookie sheet or some shallow pan that you can put the paper in, that would be really helpful. And a washable marker and a little bit of water. So the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna take your piece of paper and you're gonna crumple it up, just like this. And you can do a loose ball or you can do a tight ball. The tighter you make it, the more details you're gonna get in your landforms, because what you're doing is you're creating your mountains and your hills of your land area. And so after you crumple it up, you're gonna slowly unfold it, being patient and careful not to rip it. And as you unfold it, you don't wanna flatten it out because you want, again, to keep those peaks and hills. And so when you open it up, you'll start to see those different ridges, and you want to take a look and see which one has the most highest points and choose that side. And so as you look at it, and if you want to crumple it up even more to get a more defined area of where those mountains and hills are, you can just kind of crumple it up like this so you get a better idea, and you can start to see where your mountain peaks are and your hills, and even down in the crevices where your valleys are. And so the next step you're gonna do is you're gonna take your washable marker and you're gonna trace over your highest peaks, those ridges of your mountains, okay? Just like this. And again, if you start to lose track of where those high peaks are, and if you wanna scrunch it back up, you can. And so you're just gonna follow along all of your ridges like this, okay? To where you get something that looks more like this. And so after you have your mountain ridges and hills outlined, the next step is you're gonna tape it down onto your cookie sheet. And this is gonna help keep its shape. Okay. So just tape it down just like that so it maintains its peaks and its ridges. And at this point, you're ready to test your watershed model. And for this, you're gonna need some water. And so if you have a spray bottle at home, you can just put regular tap water in it. If you don't have a spray bottle, you can just use a little cup of water, and you might use a straw to kind of soak up a little bit and drip it slowly down. You can also just use a spoon to just get a little bit of water and slowly drip it onto your watershed model. Or maybe if you look in your kitchen, you might even find a baster where you can soak up a little bit of water and drip it down, okay? So you're going to use the water, whether it's a spray bottle or dropping it, and spray it on your watershed model to simulate rainfall. And as you watch that, you're going to look at your watershed model and see how the water flows. Did you create some creeks and streams that flow down from the mountains into the larger tributaries or rivers? How many main rivers did you create? Do you have some common low points that those rivers flow to, like some lakes or even some bays? And so maybe you've created more than one watershed. And so you can see how that water flows. And so that's one example of a watershed model you can try, and the directions are there as a link and how you can work with that model. Another activity, another watershed model activity that we do provide as well is one that we do highly recommend, because this is one that you can add to throughout the mini lessons. And so for this watershed model, you'll need a shallow pan. You can use a container that you already have at home, or you can maybe use a large aluminum roasting pan that you can get at the store. Or if you look in the garage, maybe you have a paint tray that already has a bit of an incline in it, so it helps simulate the incline of the mountain and the downward slope to your center point or your bay. And so in that pan, you're going to create your landforms and your mountains. And to do that, you could go to the store and get things like floral foam, which is what they describe in the directions, but you don't have to go buy anything. You can really we encourage you to just to look around your home. Maybe raid your recycling bin. Maybe you have some containers or even some cardboard that you can use to help create your mountains and your hills. And so, for example, this is what I've chosen to use today. So in this shallow pan, we've got a little empty deodorant bottle. And I just went into my backyard and gathered some small pine cones and some leaves and just created the shape of my mountain peak and my mountains and hills that are going down towards a low center point. And so the next step would be to use, you can use newspaper, you can use a small plastic bag. I happen to have some bubble wrap on hand that was just at home, and you can use the smooth side, and I'm gonna put it over my material. And as I do that, I can start to see what the mountain's gonna look like. You can start to see the ridges, and you can shape it a little bit so you can get an idea of where your hills are going to be, and making sure that you have that downward slope towards your low center point, or in this case your bay, where your rivers are going to flow down. So the next step is to use aluminum foil, again something that you probably have in your kitchen already, and you're going to cover the whole thing with aluminum foil. So you want a really large sheet, and you want to gently press on it. You don't want to overwork the aluminum because you don't want it to rip or tear. And so you're going to slowly put it over, and you'll start to see your mountains and your landforms take shape. So gently press in the middle, and at this point you can wrap it around the back side of your pan. Kind of tuck it in to start to see your mountain forming. And on your way down to your low center point or your bay, where you want to try and keep it nice and flat. Okay, so you have your low point, so I'm going to smooth it out right here. You can kind of see how that bay is taking shape. And then up here, you want to get a sense of your mountain, and you can use your fingers to start to kind of shape where those rivers are going to be. Where's those smaller tributaries that are going to flow down from the mountain to your main river that flows into your bay. Okay, and so you can see just using my fingertip, being gentle, not to press too hard, because again, you don't want to try not to tear it. So just using your fingertip to trace down like that. Okay, and at this point, you can test your watershed model, just like this. And so again, you're using your spray bottle to simulate rainfall, and you can watch how the water flows down on this model. And to help with the downward flow of the water, you can use a book to help prop up the back of it, just like this, so you get more of that downward flow. And so watch as the water flows and see where those creeks and streams are, where your rivers are, and if you want to mark where your major rivers are and your main river. You can come back with it. You can dry it up with paper towels so you can reuse it. And you can then trace over where you saw with that permanent marker the larger tributaries that feed into your main river and how it goes down to your bay. All right. Now, this model, again, is something that you can continue using throughout the other lessons. And so you can also add more detail to it if you'd like. So one way you can do that is you can use modeling clay. If you wanted to add things like land and you wanted to paint it, and you wanted to paint some green and brown to show the vegetation. And so this is an example of doing that. This is a much larger one using a roasting pan. But we've put modeling clay over the foil, and this is something that you could then paint. If you do this though, it's really important that you coat it afterwards, because if you want to continue using the watershed model throughout the lessons, you want to be able to reuse it. And so if you spray it with water like this and it dries, it's going to start to crack like you see here. Okay, so if you paint it before you test it out, you can use things like Scotch Guard, which is a fabric water repellent spray, or you can get some clear gloss spray to spray over it before you test it out with water. Okay, and that's if you use the modeling clay over it. All right, and so as you're continuing on with the lessons, when you move on to lesson 3, when you learn about the Shasta Dam, you'll have an opportunity to come back to your watershed model. And again, using modeling clay, you can place dams into your watershed model and see how that affects the flow of your water, and be thinking about how that affects everything else within your watershed. In lesson 4, you learn more about river ecosystems. And at that point, if you want to add more details to your rivers and your watershed to help make it a healthy watershed, you can get things like, if you want to go to the craft store and buy some fake plants that you can maybe add along to your river watersheds. Maybe you have something in your toy bin that you can already use to represent all the important parts of your watershed, the animals that all have an important job to do and have a relationship with this water, especially your salmon who might be coming up the river, or in this case, down the river. Okay. As you continue on to lesson 7, you'll have an opportunity to learn more about the human impact and threats to the health of your watershed. And for that, you're going to be adding more things to your model. And so in that point, you might want to think about using, again, things that you might already have at home. We've got some Monopoly games at home, so we just grabbed some of those pieces that you can add, like those red buildings you can have that represent farms and agriculture that might be along your watershed. The little houses can represent neighborhoods and communities that you can then add. You also want to be thinking about adding industries, and again, have some fun with it. You can use little things like little jewelry boxes and Q-tips to create a factory, to represent different industries that might be along affecting your watershed. You might have some cars in there, some ships in your bay, some ranching and ranch animals that you may want to add as well, and to be thinking about and how it impacts your watershed. Now in that lesson, you can continue on with some of the directions that are in that model about adding things like jello mix to represent the different pollutants that might be harming your watershed. Cocoa powder is another material that they recommend using to represent that. And so you'll have an opportunity to add those things and then test your watershed model again. And then finally in lesson 8, when you learn about the importance of estuaries and wetlands, you can come back to this model again, and using a sponge, you can place sponges in where your bay and your estuary wetlands are, and see how the important role they have in your watershed. Okay, so with these activities, again, the directions are in the mini lessons, so you can click on those and read through the directions to help you build these models. There's also a couple of links to some online interactives from Project Wet Foundation that help you learn about the different components in terms of a watershed, of the water cycle, so that can help in your learning. But what we also want to encourage you to think about in learning about water is something that you won't find there. It's something that you'll hopefully learn in our Run4Salmon Mini-Lessons. And that is that water is not just a resource. From the Winnemem Wintu's perspective and Indigenous peoples' perspectives, water is more than that. Water is life. It is a living being with a spirit and a memory. And because it's a living being, we have a relationship with water. And the water that we have on this earth is the same water that's been here for thousands of years since the beginning of time. And so it connects us with our ancestors. It connects us with all the living beings on the earth, the mountains, the rocks, the plants, the trees, the insects, the animals, and with each other. We're connected by our waters. And when you have a relationship, you communicate with each other. You take care of each other. It's about reciprocity. And we communicate through greeting it, speaking to it, singing to it, praying to it, and letting it know that we're here to take care of it as it in turn takes care of us. So we encourage you to be thinking about that, be thinking about your relationship with water and the mountains where you live, and also share it with us what you've learned about that relationship. Share with us some of the work you've created by posting it in our Run4Salmon Facebook page or on Instagram at #Run4Salmon-TEACH. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.